Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Brian of Hessens County, and I'm glad you could join me again today. We've got a little less than a week left of the World Building Bundle, so I wanted to take the opportunity to make a real quick video about one of my own games, which happens to be in the bundle, Run, Villain, Run. Run, Villain, Run, as you can probably tell from the spelling of the word villain, is not about mustache twirling bad guys from, Disney movie fame, but rather instead is about a type of medieval peasant. To be specific, villains were similar to serfs in that they were uh, a peasant that was bonded to a property, a piece of land. They were allowed, they were given permission in order to farm this said piece of land. However, they, in exchange, had to do certain duties and services, pay fees of certain types, uh, to be allowed to do certain things to the lord of the manor that their land was attached to. Much of what I'm about to talk about here is primarily based off of the English interpretation of villeinage, the backgrounds of basically what kind of started villeinage and serfdom actually goes all the way back to the Roman Empire, or at least like towards the very end of it, because of legal land reforms and trying to keep people from moving into cities and whatnot. But that is neither here nor there. One quirk that existed in England that this game is primarily based off of was the quirk that it was a little element of the law that came from Anglo-Saxon from the Anglo-Saxon legal tradition. And that was that if a person who was like bonded, whether that was a form of slavery or, in this case, villeinage or some other form of serfdom. If you fled, if you managed to escape, and your lord was unable to capture you and keep you for at some point over the course of the next year and a day, basically, you were considered a free person. If you managed to escape and you stayed away, basically you stayed a fugitive for a year plus a little extra, and you managed to stay a free fugitive, let's say, you became a free person. You were considered a freeman. However, that doesn't mean that this was necessarily a thing that lots of people wanted to do. Because again, remember, we are talking about the medieval period. So if you fled, that meant that you were basically taking your life into your own hands. Um, you no longer had access, obviously, to a piece of property that you could use to farm and feed yourself and potentially your family. You no longer had the legal protections, certain legal protections that you had as a villain, because you were a free person who wasn't attached to anybody anymore. Um, so all of those were risks that you were taking. So for many people, especially early on in the early medieval period, a villeinage would be better than being a cotter who basically had to work for a living instead of being able to farm your own land, or being a complete landless person who didn't even have a house. That would be even worse. Um, However, of course, if you were able to become a free person, then obviously you could go and do your own thing, whatever that might be. And in periods under where like the environment did not cooperate very well with farming, or it was, since obviously most of them depended upon this subsistence farming that they had from their piece of property, or if they were under a lord who was, taking a bit liberty when it came to certain things they were allowed or not allowed to do, um, and nobody else was aware of it, then obviously you might want to leave. Yeah. So on one hand, we have this bonded person who, if they are able to escape for a while and stay free from their lord, is considered a free person. On the other hand, we have the legal tradition that ended up getting started in England with cities, free cities, charter cities, or charter towns, market towns, all these different variations on a town or a city getting a special dispensation, always from the king, or at least normally from the king, in this particular case, uh, that gave them free rights and permissions separate from whoever the local lord was. That also meant that quite often they were very jealously guarded their rights, their legal rights. So, like, if a lord was chasing a villain into a city, then the local burghers, the local, city citizens, would turn around and beat up the lord's people and potentially even the lords themselves in order to keep them from capturing that person, because if they came in and they captured that person, then that meant that they were infringing on the legal rights of the city. That's a certain sort of flavor behind it. So the basic idea is that the players are villains. They have been laboring underneath the lords of this land in this under this neo-feudal aristocracy, with people called bailiffs who are running around and enforcing their rules and stuff. So you are um, trying to escape that life for whatever reason. That's totally up to the player. Because you and to try to make it to the free city of Avet, because if you make it to Avet, then nobody can touch you. And if you stay there for long enough, then you'll actually become a free person, in which case, literally, not even the sky is the limit. Um, so, in order to try to sort of run this type of a game, we have two major tools that we're going to utilize. The first major tool we're going to utilize is the Caltrip core. For those of you who are not familiar with Caltrip core is a dice resolution mechanic slash system, right, that primarily operates utilizing four-sided dice. And it's really simple. Basically, it's four means you got what you wanted and everything's great. Three is you got what you wanted, but not everything was perfect. Two is you failed, but like nothing really bad happened. And one is you failed and things get ugly. Um, and but instead of just rolling one die, usually there's a system set up where you would be rolling a pool, and so you'd be picking the die that actually has the highest number, and that's the actual result. Um, Lots of different systems utilize different ways of doing this. I have what I call the approaches system, which basically indicates how good your character is at certain types of at problem solving. You can have a number between 1 and 3 in any of these statistics when you make your character, so you would be rolling somewhere between 1 and 3 four-sided dice. So that is like the actual role play and things like that. However, this game also was built on the Carta system. Now, let me go into something real quick for those of you who might not be familiar with the Carta system. The Carta system was created by Cat McDonald, otherwise known as Catlingun on Twitter. And the basic idea behind the Carta system is that it utilizes a deck of cards to create a map that your characters are moving around on. Now, this map could be time, right? Or it could be a map of space. So the way that Run Villain Run utilizes the Carta system is that once you have laid out your Carta board, as I call it, right, and you're moving from one spot to another, there are two elements that are really critical to the actual like run of play, let's say. One is the cards themselves. Each time your group of characters, moves, because you could play this kind of as like a solo game or you could play it as a group play. Uh, as each time your character moves, you land on a card, and then you flip that card over. The suit of that card, so like sorry, not the suit of the card, the face value of that card corresponds with a um, an event, a scenario in the game manual. That particular event is what your characters are going to be role playing in. So let's say I pull the card, right? And we get the 10 of clubs, fellows in distress. It says, as you take a break from a meal off of the road, you see a sorry sight. A bailiff, these are the Lord's representatives who are trying to capture runaway villains and stuff, is riding at the head of this group. Behind them is a wagon being driven by a free peasant. The wagon bed has been converted into a holding cell where three rather beaten up folk are inside. One of them has a face tattoo given to villains as a punishment if they attempt to run away. What do you do? There is only one bailiff. If the villains defeat the bailiff, what does the peasant do? Did these others get caught running away from the villainage? Or did they break some other law and that's why they're being taken away? So basically, Um, if you decide to operate as a storyteller, these questions kind of are to help the storyteller kind of think about what's going to happen. If you're playing as a group without a storyteller, or game master, or whatever term you want to use for that position, game story manager, let's say. Um, if you're playing without a story manager, then these questions would be for the group, just to kind of think about as how the non-player characters are going to interact with their own with the villains. A second element that comes from the Carta SRD that has been incorporated into Run Villain Run is that of supplies. Um, Basically, you're a small group of villains out on the run, which means, of course, you can only carry so much stuff to keep you alive. But if you completely run out of supplies before you manage to make it to the City of Avet, then you have to basically, that's the end of the game. You got to give up. Basically, the idea is either you had to stop and find some place to just stay for a while, or you just went back home. Okay. So that was kind of the basic rundown of Run Villain Run, what it is, how to play it, and all that. If you would like to read some more about it, I have a blog post that I will put in the doobly-doo down below, along with the actual link to the Run Villain Run in the itch store. Of course, however, I would strongly encourage that you go ahead and get the World Building Bundle, which there should only be a couple of days left once I post this video. Um, because of course you will not only be getting my game, but also I believe 60 other, 59 other items, all of which are world building tools, advice, sort of manuals, or games that are specifically built around kind of creating a either like a mythology or building a world or creating a sort of history. A lot of the games involve that, or even creating maps, kind of like this one, or going on a big long journey like this to try to find new opportunities and build new and sort of build out new stories for yourself and your characters. Thank you all again for joining me, and do have a good zone. If you would like to show your support for this channel or for the Hessens County blog, in the description down below you will find links to the channel coffee and also the itch store. Please feel free to take a look, and thank you for your support.